The Department of Justice submitted to the United States District Court a criminal information against BNP, one of the largest banks in the world, for conspiring with other entities to deliberately and repeatedly violate longstanding United States sanctions against Sudan, Cuba, and Iran. BNP will plead guilty to conspiring to violate United States sanctions. They are taking a variety of steps to provide substantial cooperation to the government and to ensure that moving forward, they will operate in full compliance with United States law.
All too often we hear about how the American dollar is taking a beating around the world, how China actually owns us because of the massive debt, and how some countries might seek to take advantage of a perceived weakness. As always, the truth is somewhat more revealing, as America wraps some knuckles and Germany is perhaps knuckling under to Vladimir Putin. How all this affects American dollars and much more. But first, a little background, if you will, because we're not talking a few $100,000 here. We're not talking a few million. We're talking billions of dollars here that this affects between the United States and some of its partners. You heard Eric Holder there a few moments ago discuss BNP Paribas. That is a French bank. They are expected to pay up to $9 billion in a potential criminal settlement of U.S. charges. The French banking giant violated economic sanctions. The economic sanctions are interesting here because what it does, it deals with specific entities that the United States, who still has a tremendous amount of control in the financial side of things globally, is telling them you cannot do business with certain countries. Those countries are Sudan, Iran, and Cuba. Now, U.S. authorities still negotiating some other related issues here. Outlines of an anticipated guilty plea demands that more than a dozen bank workers be terminated and restrictions on the bank's dollar clearing authorization be changed. Now, this is all, again, just deep cover here and part of what's happening. The case is focusing on allegations that the bank, and this again comes down to the countries that these banks are doing business with, that the United States says, well, if you're going to use our dollars and our system of economy here, that you have to then follow our rules. It focuses on allegations that the bank processed billions of dollars in transactions involving Sudan, Iran, and Cuba, even though the deals were banned by U.S. economic sanctions. This is imposed in a response to terrorism, human rights abuses, and other issues. Many of you will go back to 9/11, the horrible attack on America here. The American government has tried to take steps since then to see if they can keep as much money as possible out of the hands of these nations that basically are involved in terrorism on a daily basis. So you have $9 billion there. But wait, it gets better, because the United States still has decided to go after a few more banks. And there is one bank here that has a real interesting point when it comes down to how it's going to affect American interests around the world. You have two other banks here, Commerzbank and Deutsche Bank. Commerzbank in Germany is the second largest lender. They are 17% owned by the German government. So take a moment, think for a second here what we're talking about, because let's not forget that in recent weeks, recent months, we have had a number of instances where the NSA has been found to be spying on Germany, German officials, German elected officials, German corporate officials, and Angela Merkel and the Germans are not pleased at all with the Americans right now. So you have a bank that is 70% owned by the U.S. government. We're talking here settlement talks, and these could even further hurt, further damage the relations between Berlin and Washington. Commerzbank is accused by U.S. authorities of transferring money through its U.S. operations on behalf of companies in Iran and Sudan. Again, we are talking about the same countries here that the United States is trying to see if they can keep money out of the hands of potential terrorists. This is Commerzbank that could pay $500 million in penalties. Certainly nothing like what the French bank has paid, but we're still talking $500 million in penalties. Deutsche Bank has said it stopped doing new business with Iran in 2007. So here you have two massive banks sitting here that the United States is looking to punish. Whether or not they actually will be able to punish these banks, that is something altogether different. Couple of minutes we have left here. Let's welcome an adjunct professor of corporate finance at Seton Hall University, former New York City mayoral candidate Ceceilia Berkowitz joins us. Ceceilia, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Good
Ceceilia,
to be here.
what is the big deal here? Because I tried to put this in perspective here when it comes down to the United States trying to stop dollars going to the countries that foster terrorism here. That immediately stands out here. But isn't it fair to say that the United States still has an economic hammer here that they can drop, and they did catch these, allegedly did catch these banks doing business with the wrong people?
Yeah, well, the first thing we learn in international business law and international ethics is that you have to obey the law for the countries you're in and when they affect you internationally. So it definitely was the responsibility of BNP Paribas and Commerce Bank to follow the laws of those countries. If not, criminal fines. Now, are those fines enough to penalize the banks? I think, yes, it is, especially considering that BNP Paribas has a year restriction, year ban doing business in U.S. dollars. And this affects the economy so much, as the French finance minister said, they want the euro to be more important in payments in the global economy, and also smaller currencies, not just the dollar. So they're worried about the dollar being so important that when the French and other banks do these crimes in the euro region, that they are severely affected by this.
The American dollar still has an awful lot of play around the world, doesn't it? Some people still seem to believe, for whatever reason, that we've been weakened and we're no longer as strong as we once were.
Yeah, historically speaking, there was the gold standard that used to back the dollar, and with the Bretton Woods system that then collapsed. And now we have dollar as a floating currency with the trust of the greenback. And a lot of countries are pegged to the U.S. dollar or the U.S. currency historically and currently. And the U.S. dollar and its exchange rates affect the global economy.
I've got about 45 seconds left here. Janet Yellen goes before Congress tomorrow. What should we expect?
What I read and what I've heard is that there should be expectations for her to talk about an easy monetary policy, which I think is good because that will further help unemployment, further help the economy be healthy and improve. I think that she may also talk about how they may raise interest rates sooner than expected because the economy has been somewhat good, including unemployment, like we discussed before. And I think she may raise they may raise interest rates in the middle of next year. She may discuss a bit of that. Financial markets should react slightly positively to this. I don't think there'll be any newsbreaker that will see so shocking that the stock markets will do incredibly well, but I think they should be slightly higher after hearing her testimony.
I think Janet Yellen will be happy if nothing really comes out of it, and she can just skate through 2 days and be very happy and go home without having to be just hammered as she has been in the past.
Yeah, that probably is what's going to happen then. So I'm sure she has a lot of power and can make that happen.
Probably so. Ceceilia Berkowitz, thanks so much for joining us. We'll do it again.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Coming up next, another example of juvenile politics being played with personal attacks that should have no bearing on who runs this country. It's still up to you to make the decision. Talk about that and more when MidPoint continues, because every day, right here, we question everything.